Attorney Robert Costello claims that he met with Michael Cohen when Michael Cohen was first shopping for a criminal defense attorney to represent him in the Stormy Daniels case. And Michael Cohen told him that he paid off Stormy Daniels on his own without involving Donald Trump. Here is attorney Robert Costello after he testified to the Manhattan grand jury on Monday, claiming that he contradicted Michael Cohen's testimony to that grand jury.
I've listened to Michael Cohen stand in front of the courthouse and say things that are directly contrary to what he said to us. My obligation is to bring the truth to both the district attorney and to Trump's lawyers. That's exactly what I did. I sent them all of this material that I talked about before. I have, 330 emails in chronological order. I have a contemporaneous memo of the first meeting at the Regency Hotel. I have a memo of the 2-hour meeting I had with 2 assistant United States attorneys and 2 FBI agents in April of 2019. I have a memo of a meeting that I had in May of 2019 with the House Intelligence Committee, 3 of their staffers, one of whom was Dan Goldman, who's now a congressman.
Congressman Dan Goldman, what's he talking about?
Well, he's not talking about Michael Cohen, I can tell you that much. That was on an unrelated matter. As an aside, I did not find Mr. Costello himself to be very credible. But he's talking about conversations that he had with Michael Cohen soon after Cohen was, his office and home were searched. And my recollection is that Cohen had enlisted Costello because Costello had a good relationship with Rudy Giuliani, and Michael Cohen wanted a pardon from Donald Trump and was towing the line, the Trump line, as a good soldier that he was at the time, to try to get that pardon. When that didn't happen, obviously Michael Cohen came clean and admitted that, in fact, that Donald Trump had instructed him to pay the hush money to Stormy Daniels. And if there was any doubt about that, there's a recording. So, this is not, this doesn't really seem to impact the case one way or another, because these conversations between Cohen and Costello happened well before Michael Cohen pleaded guilty to this charge and admitted ultimately what happened.
So let me get this straight. He said this, what we just saw him say, was outside the grand jury on Monday, and he mentions a conversation with Dan Goldman, who's now a congressman, and you're telling us that the conversation he mentioned had absolutely nothing to do with this case.
Right, and it's pretty unusual for investigators to interview lawyers. Normally, the lawyers are representing somebody that the investigators are interviewing, but in that case, we were interviewing Mr. Costello himself about unrelated, I shouldn't say it was unrelated, but it was related to Mr. Costello's efforts to secure pardons for various people, including potentially Michael Cohen. But that all predated, of course, when Michael Cohen pled guilty and admitted to lying to the House Intelligence Committee. So it's not a surprise that he also lied at the time to keep his story straight to his own attorney. That's what's relevant here.
Based on what you know about the evidence in this case, that the grand jury is hearing in Manhattan now, what do you think will be the key elements that they would focus on at this stage?
Well, look, we know some of the facts. We don't know all of the facts. We know there's a recording of Michael Cohen and Donald Trump talking about this hush money payment. We know that happened 3 weeks before the election, right after the Access Hollywood tape came out, and Donald Trump received a lot of blowback. We know that he was repaid through the Trump Organization in a false way by claiming that it was legal services, when, of course, it was not. So the facts of this are pretty plain. The question I think the Manhattan DA is grappling with and has to grapple with is, how does this fact pattern fit in with the state law? But we need to let that process play out, Lawrence. I can't emphasize this enough. Yes, Donald Trump is a former president, but he's also a citizen of the United States. rights, and if we truly are a country where no one is above the law, then he should be treated as everybody else is. He can defend himself in his case in court as every other American needs to do.